This story didn't happen to me personally. It happened to two of my cousins. They gave me permission to share this story, so I will be telling it from their perspective. My name is Leah. This story happened in April of 2016. I was 29 years old at the time. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. In April, my cousin and I, who I'll refer to as Kate, wanted to go for a Caribbean getaway, but we didn't want to go to the popular tourist destinations, such as the Bahamas, Jamaica, the Dominican Republic, or Puerto Rico. So we chose a lesser-known island called Dominica. It's a small island located between Guadeloupe and Martinique, with a population of about 72,000. We booked an Airbnb in the countryside, about 30 minutes away from the capital city. The first 2 weeks went well. We rented a car, and the Airbnb was perfect as it was located near a beach. It was the getaway that we needed. We explored the island, visited several waterfall locations, and even made some friends in the village we were staying at. But on the second day of the third week, something horrible happened. One afternoon, we didn't go out and decided just to spend time at the nearby beach with the locals. Later on, when the people left the beach to go home, Kate wanted to go back to the Airbnb, but I decided to stay there a while longer so I could have some alone time. I closed my eyes and laid down near the beach, enjoying the peace and quiet. I must have dozed off because before I knew it, it was dark, so I decided it was a good time to head back. I arrived at the Airbnb, but as I was getting my keys to unlock the door, two men wearing masks came out of the bushes and started beating me with batons. One even threw a rock at me while I was down, causing me to scream in pain. Kate came out and tried to defend me, but the men also overpowered her. They ran into the Airbnb and ransacked the entire place. Some nearby villagers saw what was happening and quickly came to our aid, but by that time, the two men had already fled. They had taken my laptop, my phone, and my wallet. Luckily for us, our passports weren't stolen. We were both bleeding pretty badly. At some point, I felt like I was going to pass out. The police eventually showed up, and after receiving some medical assistance, we told them what happened. They were shocked. Dominica is usually a pretty safe country. Two of the villagers drove us to the hospital, which was located in the capital city of Roseau. We had to stay in the hospital for a while because our injuries were so bad. We even had to change our return flight. Thankfully, we got out alive. As far as I know, the two perpetrators who attacked us were never caught. This event has forever traumatized Kate and I. However, I still like Dominica and would love to go visit there again someday. But next time, I'll be a lot more cautious. I was reading a story that reminded me of an event from over 20 years ago. It was around the second half of 1998. I had taken a security guard job at a plant that manufactured locks. I usually worked one of 3 shifts, 4 p.m. to 12 a.m., 7:30 p.m. to 3:30 a.m., 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. The 7:30-3:30 shift was for extra coverage, so there were always 2 of us from 7:30 to midnight. It was a very routine, boring job for the most part. We did our rounds, logged everything out of the ordinary, and watched a tiny monitor displaying the CCTV feed. Things went by in an almost peaceful manner. I worked, saved, bought a car, and had planned to move. By late March of 1999, I served my notice and prepared to head cross-country. A new hire was brought in to fill my spot, a soft-spoken man named Calvin. As part of his training, Calvin spent time working all 3 shifts. At night, he was a shadow, working by himself, getting a feel for the plant's nocturnal routines. Most nights he worked with myself and a female guard named Amira, who was around my age. I was 18 at the time. Calvin was about a decade or so older than us. He was quiet and polite, though something seemed to be missing. There's usually a spark that genuinely nice people seem to have, and it just wasn't there. Whenever he went on rounds with me, he would ask questions about the job and make small talk. I noticed that he was a bit odd, laughing at odd times and changing his tone mid-sentence. At the time, I chalked it up to him just being socially awkward, and that would pass. One night, near the end of his first week, he went on a round with Amira. When they returned to the office, I knew there was something wrong. Amira was normally very talkative, but she would barely say a word. I wasn't sure what happened. I waited until Calvin went to the restroom to ask. During their rounds, everything had been normal until they reached the brass mill. It's a section of the plant that shut down around 6 a.m. There were usually no employees there after that time, and there were no lights on. They were making their way to a checkpoint on a landing atop a flight of stairs when the mood shifted. Amira told me that she turned around only to find he was right on her. Startled, she backed against the grating at the end of the landing, and he leaned in towards her, his face nearly touching hers. He said something flirtatious to her in a very low voice. When she mentioned his wedding band, he said, "It's gonna be over soon." From then on, I did the rounds, taking Calvin with me each time. The night ended without further incident, and I left a note for our supervisor, detailing what happened. The next night came and went, with no Calvin. I did the rounds while Amira stayed in the office. On my second to last shift, I came in to find Amira freaking out. She found out why Calvin hadn't been at work. Apparently, he had been arrested for murdering his wife. She had been dismembered and burned. Parts of her body had been placed in a pond less than a mile from where we worked. That night and the next, Amira called the jail just to make sure that they were still holding him. Based on the time frame, he had killed his wife months before he even started that job. There is an article linked below. I had just turned 21. To celebrate, I went to a bar with one of my friends. My friend was drinking on the way, so he was already pretty drunk by the time we got there. When we sat at the bar, a cute girl came over to talk to me. She said her name was Candace, and I noticed that she had really bright red hair. I assumed that she had dyed it. It looked good, but unnatural. This girl was flirting with both of us. I think she could tell my friend was already drunk. To be honest, I played along like I was drunk as well, because it seemed to be working for my friend. I didn't know if she was trying to get free drinks, so I told her that we didn't have much money. In a twist, she offered to buy us drinks, and I started to get confused as to who she liked between the two of us. My friend eventually went to go use the restroom. Before he got back, he was kicked out by the bouncers. He had become too drunk. Candace and I went outside with him, and she kept telling him to go home with her. He was clearly out of it and could barely answer her. I told her that he was way too intoxicated and that I couldn't let him go anywhere. I didn't want him to wake up hungover in some random house with no car and no idea how he got there. But Candace kept insisting, saying that she would take care of him. But I told her that I had to stay with him. I was more sober, and he was my responsibility. I assumed that she thought that I was jealous or cock-blocking my friend, but that wasn't the case. He could barely stand, and he had lost interest in Candace, and was doing everything in his power not to throw up. She immediately started flirting with me and offered to get my friend a taxi to drive him home, and me and her could go back to her place. At this point, I had had a few drinks and I was pretty buzzed, so I agreed. Scoring a touchdown would have been a happy ending for me. So we got my friend a taxi and walked to her car. I slightly stumbled on the way there. "Wow, you're pretty drunk, huh?" she said, smiling, as she held on to my arm. Yeah," I said. I don't know why, but I felt slightly anxious. Everything was just happening too easy for me, so I felt on edge. We got into her car and drove down the street. "You want to stop at the liquor store and grab more? Don't worry about paying. I'll buy," she offered. I didn't want to drink any more than I already had. I was already pretty blitzed, and I wanted to be able to carry myself throughout the rest of the night. Sometimes I made myself look stupid when I drank too much, so I didn't want to ruin anything with Candace. I told her that I had drank enough, but she insisted. I didn't want to seem lame, so I told her to get me a pint of liquor and some apple juice to chase it. She went inside and came out with a lot more than just a pint. I assumed that she wanted to drink more as well. On the car ride, we passed a bottle back and forth, but she only took tiny sips. I tried to take small sips as well, but she kept passing the bottle back to me and telling me to drink. I somehow managed to drink all of my apple juice. I then pretended to drink the alcohol by spitting it back into the apple juice bottle. I then tossed the apple juice bottle out the window when she wasn't looking. I didn't want her knowing that I was acting a lot drunker than I actually was. I took a couple more sips of liquor and finished off the bottle. Throughout the car ride, I kept calling her the wrong name, just to get a reaction out of her. But she just kept letting me call her Carla without correcting me. For some reason, I thought she lied about her name. We drove up to a house, and I pretended to trip and stumble into her front door. She helped me walk inside by holding me up. She opened her front door, which was unlocked, and we walked into her house. She closed her front door and then locked it. I thought it was strange, but I assumed that she didn't want anyone walking in on us. I told her that I had to use the restroom. She showed me where it was, and I locked the door and looked in the mirror. I just felt strange. Something was off about this entire situation. I felt myself becoming more drunk from finishing the bottle earlier. I turned on the sink to make some noise and made myself puke up the liquor. I flushed and went back to the sink and started drinking the tap water. I just didn't want to be drunk, but I admit I still wanted to hook up with Candace. I turned the sink off, and I could hear her talking to someone. "He's drunk as hell. He can barely stand up. Do it." Who the hell was she talking to? And do what? I walked out of the bathroom into the living room. The moment I stepped into the living room, I saw her walking into another room. All I could see was the back of her head. The living room was pretty dark. "Hey, where are you going?" I slurred. She then came back into the dark living room. I couldn't see her face. Let's just go into my room, okay?" she said. Again, it was dark and I really couldn't see her face. But her eyes, they were different. Her face was different. That's when I realized this was another girl with the same hair, likely wearing a wig of some kind. My heart felt like it stopped, but I tried to conceal the fact I was looking at a different girl. I kind of smiled at her and told her I just needed to use the restroom one more time and apologized for being so drunk. "Oh, it's fine. Just hurry up, okay?" I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I heard her whispering to someone, and I swear I heard a male voice whispering back. Honestly, I didn't concentrate on what was being said. Something sketchy was going on, and I had to get the hell out of that house. I opened the bathroom window and jumped straight out of it, then ran faster than I ever had in my life. I didn't look back or anything. I just ran through the backyard, jumped the fence, and hit the road, running towards the main highway. I kept running until I saw a 24-hour gas station and ran inside and stood directly out front in view of the security camera as I called to myself a taxi. I tried to think about what exactly happened that night. What was she, or they, planning? Why did they tell me a fake name? Why was she trying to get my friend and I so drunk? I thought maybe it was a robbery, but she kept spending money on us. She kept buying us drinks, and even paid for my friend's taxi cab. And more importantly, why did she dye her hair? And why was that other girl wearing a wig? Who was she talking to? And what was in that room they tried to lure me into? The day after this incident, I drove back to that house with a couple of my friends just to see what was going on. No one was there. No cars, no people, nothing. It was just an empty house. I ended up finding out that house was a summer rental. Whoever those people were had broken into the house to use it for the night and never came back. Before I tell my story, I'm going to describe myself so that you can put yourself in my shoes and imagine just how helpless I would have been in this situation. I am a 22-year-old female, weighing in at 110 pounds, standing 5'3", and I'm fairly petite. My father is a retired police officer, so I grew up around guns. I have loved them since the first time I fired one, and as soon as I was of age, I bought a Taurus. I always carry it with me, but on this particular day, I had forgotten it on my dresser. It was around 11 a.m. on a Wednesday morning when I decided to head off to Walmart to do some shopping. I knew that I wouldn't be there long, as I only wanted to purchase a few things. At first, nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary, but I suddenly had the urge to speed up my shopping and go home. It was a strange, unfamiliar feeling of dread and nervousness, mixed with that uncomfortable feeling you get when someone is staring at you. I've dealt with gawking creeps before, but this time was different. I felt threatened. All of my senses went into overdrive as I scanned my surroundings for danger, and I found myself wishing I hadn't left my gun at home. After looking around, nothing seemed suspicious. I continued browsing through the aisles, trying to remember what I was looking for. I'm not sure how much time passed, but at some point everything felt fine again. I was beginning to pick up a box of yogurt when I heard a man's voice from behind me say, "Ma'am?" I felt my face get hot and my heart jumped. I turned around and found myself looking at a police officer and a Walmart employee. Thinking that I was about to get accused of shoplifting, I simply replied with a soft, yes? I was then asked to follow them. I'm not sure every Walmart has this, but at the entrance of the store is a room with windows and glass that are all covered by blinds. On the door is a big sticker of our city's police badge. This is the room they led me to. Still confused, I walked in and sat on the chair the officer pointed at. There were 2 other officers inside, as well as a Walmart manager. I literally could not even process what these men told me. I can't even remember what was said word for word, but I'll summarize. Basically, as I was shopping, one of the employees noticed that there was a very sketchy man following me. At first, he thought perhaps the guy was with me, but as he continued watching, he noticed that this man was kind of drawing back, or quickly look at random products on the shelves every time I turned my head in his direction. He definitely knew this guy was a weirdo when he pulled out his phone, aimed it at me, and began taking pictures. The employee finally decided to alert a manager, and they decided to tell the police who were working there. They asked the man to go with him. I don't know how they ended up getting this out of him, but they ended up going through the pictures on this guy's phone, texts, and call log. He had been sending pictures of me and texts describing me to another person. The messages said things like 5'2" to 5'5", 100 pounds, long black hair, fair skin, with an estimation of my bra size. Not only that, but apparently he had his eye on me from the moment I got there, because he had also sent texts describing my truck. Whoever he was sending these things to responded by saying, "Looks good. Waiting by the truck. Give me a heads up." They asked if I wanted to see the pictures and texts, but I declined, already feeling sick to my stomach and fucking angry. I was taken to the police station, where they informed me that the men worked for human traffickers that operated out of Mexico. These guys would hang out at random places looking to fill orders. Once they found a person who fit a description, they would wait by the person's car, abduct them, and eventually get them to Mexico. My husband and my dad were filled in. The police offered to have a patrol watch over my place that night, but since they told me that the men had most likely not been stalking me for longer than the time I was at the store, I told them that I would be okay without surveillance. I just really wanted to get the hell home. I can't even imagine what my life would be right now if it hadn't been for that Walmart employee. I never go shopping without my gun now.
There's always a reason to be afraid.